My friend has had some difficult emotional experiences during the last couple of days, but I think this is something that we could work out amongst ourselves. All right, I'll leave this part of it with you. I appreciate it.
Hey Jordan, how's it going? Congratulations on winning 11 Second Club. My name is Don Kim. I am a mentor here at Animation Mentor. I am teaching Body Mechanics Class 1, Introduction to Body Mechanics. And I've been working in the industry for close to 30 years. I've worked as mostly, half my career has been as an animator, and the other half I've been working as a story artist as well as a director. So currently I'm working with Nickelodeon Animation and directing a series for them. So it's my pleasure to give you a review, a crit on your shot. And it's very well done. Obviously, you won the 11 Second Club for this week. Let's go ahead and watch it together.
My friend has had some difficult emotional experiences during the last couple of days, but I think this is something that we could work out amongst ourselves. All right, I'll leave this part of it with you. I appreciate it.
Nice.
My friend has had some difficult emotional...
So I like the setup. So you can see the character in the foreground, and it looks like the croc is holding him up. I like the subtlety in the acting. You're not overposing, especially the guy who's talking. You keep him pretty much still until the end when he's
during the last couple of days. But I think this is
offering his hand, right, for what he wants.
Something that we could work out amongst ourselves.
Then you have this little beat with Croc kind of exhaling really hard in an aggressive way. And I thought this shot in particular was very well done. Again, the subtlety of acting. The animation on the hair was, the timing of it's really nice. Has a nice airy feel to it. Feels like hair, so that really nice job there. And I do like the staging in this shot in particular. Like all the lines kind of lead to the character of focus here, which is great. So nice composition. He's pretty much on a third here in the frame, so it's working really well compositionally. It's leading your eye. So nice job there. And I like how you
All right, I'll leave this part of it with you.
The whistle. So, obviously this is kind of the, more of a reveal of what he's holding.
All right, I'll leave this part of it with you.
But you have it like dangle for a bit. So you can actually see that it's a whistle before he drops into his hand, instead of it just kind of, dropping it and falling through frame and landing in his hand. This is way better in terms of clarity. I mean, if there was a joke involved with the whistle, it would be a better payoff, I guess. But still, knowing what it is that this guy wants,
I'll leave this part of it with you,
is important, because this is the reason why he's in the predicament he's in, right? And again, I like the subtlety of acting in this guy as well.
All right, I'll leave this part of it with you. I appreciate it.
It feels nice and natural. You have mostly kind of focusing on the facial expressions and the acting there, and just more subtle naturalistic movement in his body. He doesn't really have to move a lot anyways, and that's good. And you kept it that way, made it feel more natural instead of over exaggerating it. And also, not moving him too much helps with clarity too, right? So like if he was doing this big antic and then lifting his arm up and then, maybe like accenting it down as he releases a whistle, it'd be too much movement. It would get kind of too busy and it would take away from the clarity. So keeping him a bit more still and keeping his actions a little bit more measured, a bit more conservative, and focusing more on the facial expression, which is the more important thing anyways, to see his reaction. I think those are really good choices. So overall, really nice job with the animation, and also it's traditionally animated, which is awesome. I love traditional animation, and your drawing is quite strong too. Your construction of the characters, animating them in 3D space, giving them volume, keeping them on model too, and all of that. So really great job technically with the traditional animation as well. So what I was going to say is, the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is composition, and maybe just tweaking it a little bit more so in this shot than the other one, to see if we can just kind of push it just to make it a little bit clearer the focus of the scene and just overall clarity. So the first thing I did notice about this first framing or composition is the main character that's talking here, this guy, he's kind of fighting in terms of like visual focus or just where your eye is going to, he's kind of fighting a bit with the croc and then also with this arm, right? Because they kind of occupy, he kind of occupies about half the space in the frame, and so does the other two characters. So you're sort of, your eye doesn't, I mean, the guy who's talking, obviously you're gonna, your focus is gonna go to him. However, when you first come to this scene and you start to watch it from the beginning, it's a bit hard to tell who you should be focusing on. So again, just for clarity and to make it stronger in terms of focus, where you want the character eye, your sorry, not character, the audience's eye to go. What I would probably do is maybe move him a little bit closer to the camera and a little bit further over. Whoops, and a little bit further over to the left. So just a touch, bigger in scale and a little bit further to the left. And then I would move this guy a little bit further to the left as well. Maybe not that far, but, and maybe not as big either. So he can be a little bit more set back, like his arm could be extended a bit more in front of him. So he's just a little smaller in scale and shifted just a bit more to the right. And then the person in the foreground, I think it would be good maybe to show the bottom of his face. So maybe you can read a little bit of some expression, some sense of him looking afraid or having a little bit of context there, because just to have the arm sticking out, it's a little hard to read exactly what's going on. Obviously, as you listen to what he's saying, then yeah, you kind of get it. But like the instant read type thing, when you just first start to be introduced to the scene, to make that a little stronger. So maybe show a little bit of the face, so you can see a bit of a grimace on this other character's expression. And then I would lower his arm initially like this. So again, it's not sort of getting in the way, because right now it's so prominent in the frame. It kind of pulls your eye a little bit. So if you just lower his arm, and I think that's enough information in the over the shoulder here to so the audience knows that there's somebody here, right? And then also with the pose of the croc, it also helps with the arm here that he's being held up by the croc. So I think that's enough information to make that clear without it dominating the frame. And then pulling this guy forward a bit, just making him a little bit bigger and shifting him over, he's gonna be a bit more dominant in the frame compositionally, just a little bit more dominant. And I think that will help, right? To lead your eye. I think that was it for the composition of the first shot. The second shot, I think it's better. And like I said earlier, like all the lines of perspective, lead to him, which is great. That's a really nice touch in terms of like getting your eye to kind of go to his face. But again, in terms of like screen real estate, the croc is quite dominant in the frame, right? Because you see a lot of the back of his head, which I don't think is necessary information. Like I don't think you really need to see that much of his, because you've already established in the earlier scene that he is holding him up, right? And he's standing beside the guy who was talking earlier. So you don't really need to see that much more of him here. And I think by, again, maybe getting this character to be a little bit more prominent in terms of like real estate in the frame will help with clarity. So I think what we could do is we could probably tighten up the framing here. So kind of do this just a little bit tighter here. And that way the character that's being held up is a bit more, in terms of like the space he occupies, is a bit more prominent. It's a bit more dominant, and that would just help with the clarity again. So other than that, I think really it looks really good. The way that you compose the shots, just a few little tweaks there. So let's talk a little bit about acting then.
My friend has had some difficult emotional experiences during the last couple of days, but I think this is something that we could work out amongst ourselves.
So let's talk about this guy first, the shorter guy.
My friend.
So I feel like, his initial pose, it's a little bit too straight up and down. So I know it's kind of a casual, like the beginning of the scene is more of a casual conversation, and then at the end, it becomes a little bit more devious just with his expression. But I still feel like you can give this initial pose, this initial key pose, he's in for a while, a little bit more appeal. So, maybe give him a little bit of I mean, you can't really see his lower body, but indicate like maybe a little bit of a weight shift or something. Try to get his pose to feel a bit more, maybe that's too much of an angle on the shoulders, but excuse me, try to make his pose feel a little bit more naturalistic and not so kind of rigid, kind of straight up and down. So maybe you have a slight angle in his shoulders. Maybe the arms are behind his back. Maybe you have a slight opposing tilt in his head. Actually, that sort of works with this head tilt already. And maybe like as he's talking, maybe he has like a little bit of a weight shift. Again, just kind of break it up so he's not so still. You don't want to have a lot of movement because again, this is kind of a casual conversation at the beginning. You don't want him to overact, but just a little bit of kind of naturalistic settling, weight shift, something to kind of break it up a bit because he is in that pose for quite a while. The other thing I was going to say is maybe when he talks about
had some difficult emotional experiences during the last
experiences, maybe he shoots a glance to the croc. So he kind of like looks over the croc, maybe leans toward him a bit, kind of shoots him a glance, and then the croc can maybe do like a growl or something, and then maybe he just kind of pushes the guy up a little bit harder against the tree or whatever he's against. Again, just to help to sell what's going on, right? Like this guy's being bullied. The croc is the henchman or the bodyguard. So selling that aggression as this scene is progressing will help like later when he does that big exhale and he kind of blows in his face and he looks petrified. That might help with kind of reinforcing that idea. Shoot him a quick glance, maybe he growls, and again, it kind of maybe pushes him against the wall a little bit. And then when he pushes the foreground character against the wall, you can, if you see part of his face, you can see him kind of like grimace, and maybe his arm kind of comes up in a more of a defensive sort of pose, like maybe his hand, comes up like this or something. Give a little bit of a reaction.
Days, but I think this is something that we could work out amongst ourselves.
And then I was going to say, maybe keep him in the initial, the speaking guy, in the initial pose a little bit longer.
But I think this is something that we could work out.
We can work out
amongst ourselves.
And then amongst ourselves is when he does the lean over and then he presents his hand, just delaying it a little bit. It just feels like
work out amongst ourselves.
He holds this pose for a little bit too long. So I think it's better if the reveal of he wants something happens a bit later. So it's a little bit more, not necessarily surprise, but it just has a bit more build up. And then you're not like holding that pose for as long. So keeping him in that initial pose, once you tweak it, obviously, through, we can work it out and then have him lean forward for this beat here. Now, the other thing was, see how we talked about this earlier, but see how big this hand is in frame. It's kind of dominating the frame, and then his hand is overlapping it. So that probably isn't the greatest. So I think if this hand ends up coming up for like a defensive kind of pose, keep it away from his hand so you get nice negative space around both, and that way the clarity is stronger too. I just had a note about this transition from this pose to this pose because everything is sort of moving at the exact same timing. So maybe I would start with the lean and then delay the hand coming up. So you can just have a bit more lead and follow. So start with the lean and then the hand comes up and opens up. So right now the transition is happening a little bit it's a little posy, going from one exact pose to the next exact pose. You could even break it up further and maybe even start to move his head first. So you can kind of lead with the head, then the body, and then the hand comes up, right? You can break it up that way as well. Just to, again, add some overlapping action and break up some elements, add some lead and follow. This snort or the exhale from the croc at the end, it was a little hard to read. I had to watch it a couple of times before I kind of got, why his hair was flipping up, and because the actual exhale I know it's kind of like it's not supposed to be a huge accent, from him, but I feel like it needs to be a little bit bigger for that to read. So you don't want him to have like a massive anticipation and like really shoot his head forward, because that'd be too much. It would look unnatural, or it wouldn't really fit the scene. But I think you need a little bit more movement on the croc so that your eye can go to him, right? And then you can register what just happened, like big kind of aggressive snort or exhale, right? Maybe even kind of lifts him up a little bit higher or something, and that way you see the foreground character move a bit too. And again, that's going to help draw your eye over to the croc. Right now, because the movement is very isolated just to his nose, you don't really look at him. You're kind of looking more at this guy, the speaking character. So you sort of miss that whole sort of exhale, right? And because you miss it, then you don't really understand as much what's going on here with the hair flipping up. So just make that accent from the croc a bit bigger, so you can read it a bit clearer. Your eye can get drawn to him. Now, the other thing I was going to say with the speaking guy in this scene was his lip sync is a little bit poppy. Like there's too many open and close positions during his dialogue. So think about a bit more how you can combine sounds. So try not to have each mouth shape hit a particular consonant or part of a word. The words kind of blend together. So I'll give you an example. Experiences, the P, you would close your mouth, but the end part of that word, experiences, your mouth would kind of just stay, slightly open, right, for that part. So you wouldn't have another closed mouth.
During the last couple of days, but I think this is something that we could work out.
And another section was,
I think this is something that we could.
And this is something, and this is. If you look at my mouth, and this is some. So some, you have to close your mouth on the M, but and this is my mouth. There's maybe a little bit of movement in my jaw, but my mouth kind of stays open. And this is something, right? And something, the ing, I just kind of, my corners of my mouth come out. But trying to find those sections of the dialogue where, the series of words or a couple of words can be shown in lip sync through one shape, and maybe just kind of tweaking the shape a little bit, a little bit of maybe closing the mouth slightly and opening it slightly, but not a fully closed and open mouth. I mean, it does work. Technically, it does make sense, to have those shapes, but because he's talking so fast, it becomes very sort of chattery, and it becomes kind of poppy. So again, just trying to, listen for the sound and try to simplify the lip sync and have less of those extreme open and close shapes. The other thing I was going to say about him, and it's the change of expression.
Emotional experiences during the last couple of days, but I think this is something that we could work out amongst ourselves.
And again, it has to do with lead and follow, because right now when he changes his expression, like for instance here, when his brows come up and his eyes go wide, or here when he goes into this more sinister pose and his brows come down, everything's sort of moving at the same, like his eyes and his brows are moving at the same timing. Even like, for instance, here, like his head is turning and dropping and tilting down as his brows come down, as his eyes start to squash. So everything's timed at the same timing. So we try to break that up a bit. So usually, maybe a good rule of thumb is to lead with the brows. So you're gonna lead with the brows, and then as the brows start to come up, then you can tilt the head up, right? So they're not happening at the same time. Same thing on the down. Maybe start to have. You're sort of doing it actually on this part,
But I think
which is nice. But maybe what you can do, just to break it up even a little bit further, is offset each brow from one another by maybe one frame to break it up a little bit further. And then when the brows come down to its lowest point, you can maybe have a little bit of an overshoot, like a slight overshoot. Like have the corners of the brow kind of come down a little bit more, and then bounce up just a slight bit, just to give a little bit more a sense of like some compression there.
something that we could work out amongst ourselves.
And I thought, like, amongst ourselves, you can add one more slight facial accent there. It could just be like the brows coming up slightly, still in the angry, sinister pose, but just kind of coming up and just doing a little bit of a flare, right? Just a little, maybe the eyes widen slightly too, just to kind of accent that word,
Ourselves.
which is, I think that's a key word in what he's asking for, right?
Ourselves.
He looks a little bit too frozen there. And last thing with this guy was maybe we're gonna. It might help to maybe push this pose, this kind of sinister pose, a little bit more, like make him feel a little bit more aggressive, like a tiny bit, because right now his pose doesn't change much. Like his shoulders are round. He just kind of turns his body, but his actual posture doesn't really change, right? But his demeanor has changed and his expression has changed. I think we can do that with the body language too. So maybe it could be as simple as maybe bringing his shoulders up, and maybe the one arm now is like fist on hip or something. So his shoulders are a bit more square. He's kind of broadened his chest. Maybe he's not so hunched over either. Maybe he's a bit more like chest out or something. He could still tilt his head, but maybe he's not like so like hunched over like this. Maybe he's more a prouder kind of pose, more dominant, more confident pose, right? Because now he's like basically saying, "Give me what I want," or else, right? So maybe just also helping with that sense of acting in his body pose. You have it in the face, but just kind of pushing it a bit more in the body pose would help as well. And I think this scene was playing really, really nice.
All right, I'll leave this part of it with you.
I appreciate it. My friend has had.
I didn't really have any notes for this section.
All right, I'll leave this part of it.
Maybe the only thing that I was going to say is, if you do that change with the croc, you just have to hook it up to this scene, right? Because if you have a bigger like exhale accent action, you would just have to make sure that he's just finishing that action at the top of this scene to make sure there's a connection. And that way, right now, like the croc again is like too still in the foreground, so there's a lack of a sense of connection of what just happened. Like the croc just kind of blew in his face, but the croc is frozen here, so it's a bit hard to tell what's going on. That's the trouble I had with sort of registering that at first. So if you just have him kind of like lunge forward a little bit to kind of snort at him, have him settle at the top of this scene, right, to hook that up, that will just again help visually connect. But otherwise, I think everything else about the acting in the second scene I thought was working really well, really well. So I hope all that makes sense and is helpful to you. Again, congratulations for winning 11 Second Club, and really, really nice work. And we will hopefully see you again and talk to you later. Take care.